Hey everybody, just wanted to go over the notes for section 2.4 really quick. So we are using formulas, and sometimes it's helpful when using formulas to be able to rearrange them. So solving for a variable means solving the equation for a different variable. So for example, in this equation right here, or formula, we have c all by itself. And on the other side it says c is equal to 2 pi r. Okay? Now normally when we solve equations, we're looking to get an answer of, x equals to a specific number, something like that. When we're solving these, however, what we're going to get is we're going to get x equals, and then the other side is not going to necessarily be a specific number, but it's going to be a different formula, okay? So we're basically trying to rearrange stuff so that a particular variable is by itself. So if we want to take that same formula, c equals 2 pi r, which happens to be the formula for circumference of a circle, we want to solve it for r. That means we want to get this variable r all by itself. So that means the other stuff on this side. So here's the variable we want to solve for r. And it happens to be on the right side of the equation. The other things on the right side of the equation are the 2 and the pi. So that's what we have to get rid of. Now, keep in mind, multiplication and division are inverses. Addition and subtraction are inverses. Exponents and roots are inverses. So if I want to get rid of the 2 and the pi right here, and they are attached with multiplication, the inverse of multiplication is division. So to get rid of them, I'm going to use division. So we're going to divide by 2 pi. Now that will cancel out the 2 and the pi, leaving us just with the r. But whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. Now over on this side here, there is nothing that will cancel out. 2 won't cancel with the c, pi won't cancel with the c, so I'm left with the final answer of r is equal to c over 2 pi. And that's all we can do. We know that we are finished because the variable that they wanted us to solve for, r, is all by itself. That's how we know we're done. So let's take a look then at example number 1. Wants us to solve the equation for n. So if I separate the two sides, I can see that n is on the right side of the equation, which means I need to get rid of the 1/4 right here, and I also have to get rid of this thing right here. Now I know there might be a temptation to use distributive property, but that's a no-no. Here's why. In this particular case, if I were to use distributive property, my equation would look like this. C equals 1/4 n times a1 plus 1/4 n times a2. I've now given myself two variables. Remember, we're trying to solve for a variable. We want to focus on the one variable. We don't want it in a whole bunch of different places. We want it in just one place. And in my original problem, that is the only n variable in the whole equation. So using distributive property actually gives me one there and there, which makes it more work, which is why this is not going to be the approach that we take. Okay? So over here, if we go back to this version of it right here, we have to get rid of 1/4. So to get rid of the 1/4, we are simply going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal, 4/1. The 1 and 4 cancel out with the 4 and a 1. So on this side, we're left with n, and then parentheses a1 plus a2. On this side, there's really no need for a denominator because it's just a 1, so we're left with 4c. Now, I need to get rid of this thing right here. And this whole thing is attached to the n via multiplication. So the inverse of multiplication, as we said before, was division. So I'm going to divide by a1 plus a2. Do the same thing on this side. And this whole parenthesis on top cancels with that whole parenthesis on the bottom, leaving us with n on this side and 4c over a1 plus a2 on this side. we take a look at example 2 here. Once us solve the equation for W. There's W right there on the right-hand side. There are two things there with the W, or a few things, excuse me. We have this 2 in front of it, and then we have this 2L term here. So let's start getting rid of stuff. I'm going to get rid of the 2L from both sides. That's going to cancel out, and I'm left with 2W. This side, I'm left with P minus 2L. Now I'm going to divide by 2 to get rid of that. Divide this side by 2. The 2's will cancel out, and we get W equals P minus 2L over 2. Now if I wanted, say I didn't want to get rid of the 2L first. Say I wanted to get rid of this 2 first. We can do that. Here's how that would look. So we start with P equals 2L plus 2W. This 2 that we want to get rid of right here is attached through multiplication. The inverse of multiplication is division. So we're going to divide this whole side by 2 and this side by 2. Now over here on the left side, P divided by 2 can't simplify. On the right side, the 2 here can cancel with that 2, and this 2 here can cancel with that 2. So we are going to be left with those both canceling out, and we're left with L plus W. And now we just subtract L from both sides, and we get P over 2 minus L equals W. Now these look slightly different, but they are both correct answers. The difference is in this answer here, we took the two terms, the P and 2L, and we have them together in a single fraction. Here, we separated them out into two separate terms. Okay. So, some common formulas that you guys should be aware of. In a rectangle, the perimeter is equal to 2 times the width plus 2 times the length. Now, that could also be written as 2 times the base plus 2 times the height. It just depends on what you want to call the sides of the triangle, okay? Or excuse me, what you want to call the sides of the rectangle. In a triangle, the area for a triangle is equal to 1/2 base times the height. The area of a rectangle is just equal to length times width, or again, if you prefer using base and height, area of a rectangle is equal to base times height. The key to remember about these things is picturing the shape. So for a rectangle, you know, again, some people will refer to this as the length and this is the width. Some people will take their rectangles and call this the base and the height. Doesn't make a difference. In a triangle, the base has to be one of the sides of the triangle. The height has to be the distance from the base to the point on the other side. So here's my base, here's the point on the other side, so that distance right there is the height. Note that the height and the base will always make a right angle with each other. Okay, and then last formula here, it says volume of a rectangular prism or box. And that formula is simply V equals length times width times height. And again, this depends on what you want to refer to the sides, but typically there's a rectangular prism, it's just a box. Here's the length, here's the width, and here's the height. So ultimately, to find the volume, we're just multiplying all three dimensions of the figure. All right, so let's do a couple more examples. Example 3, a rectangular garden plot is 3 times as long as it is wide. Its perimeter is 84 feet. What is the length and width of the garden? So we're talking about rectangular gardens, let's draw a rectangular garden. Okay, we could even put some pretty flowers in there if you want. So there we go. here's our length, here's our width. Now we know that the formula we want to use for perimeter, because it's talking about perimeter, is 2W plus 2L. We also know that the perimeter has to be 84 feet, so we could plug that number in and say 84 is going to equal 2 times something for W plus 2 times something for L. Okay? The reason we can't just use W and L is that's two variables, and if we have two variables in the equation, we won't be able to solve it. So we need to have it as one variable. Fortunately, they give us a comparison. 3 times as long as it is wide. Now in reading that, that's implying it's longer than wider. Okay? So it's longer than it is wide. So specifically 3 times. So that means the length is going to be 3 times as big as the width. Which means if I come over to this formula here, I'm going to keep using W for width, but for length, instead of using W, or excuse me, instead of using L, I'm going to use 3 times W. And by doing so, I've now used only one variable in this problem. So we get 84 equals 2W plus 6W, because when I multiply the 2 and the 3. So 84 equals 8W, divide each side by 8, and we get W equal to 10.5. So if I bring that information back up to my picture here, W is equal to 10.5. The width is equal to 3 times that, which is equal to 31.5. So my length is 31.5, and notice my units here are feet, so 31.5 feet, and the width is 10.5 feet. Okay, last example. This one is on the next page though. All right, let's zoom in here a little bit. It says the volume V of a pyramid is given by the formula V equals 1/3 BH. And I want you to keep in mind, if it's not one of the basic formulas that we have on the front side of this, we'll provide the formula for you. The SAT does the same thing, so no reason we can. So volume of a pyramid is 1/3 B times H. All right, first thing they want us to do is they want us to solve the formula for B. So if we, again, draw the two sides here, B is on the right side. So we have to get rid of the 1/3 and the H. So we're going to multiply by 3/1 to get rid of the 1/3. And then 3's cancel and the 1's cancel, and we get BH. And this side, there's really no need for the fraction because the only denominator is 1, so we just get 3V. Next, we divide both sides by H because we need to get rid of that. And the H's cancel out, and we find out that the B, which stands for base area, is equal to 3 times V over H. So there's our answer for part A. B equals 3V over H. Now, part B says if the volume is 30 meters cubed and if the height is 10 meters, what is the base area? So they're giving us the information we need to solve for base area. So if I take my formula that I rearranged, 3V over H equals B, or excuse me, let me rewrite that the other way. B, whoops, not the tool that I wanted there, sorry. B equals 3V over H. We get B equals 3, put a parentheses in for V, put a parentheses in for H. V, we're going to put 30 in there. H, we're going to put in 10. And then we get 3 times 30 divided by 10, which is 90 divided by 10, which is 9. Now, if we pay attention to our units here, we had volume divided by height. So we had meters cubed on top and meters on the bottom for our units. So if you remember our exponents, I have 3 m's on top, 1 on the bottom. That reduces to two m's, or m squared. All right, so the base area is 9 meters squared. And there we go.